We can add a, so we will try to share the screen here. Stop two.
Yes.
And now you should see the presentation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Today, as Nana told you, we will be talking about the Swedish Care of Young Persons Act called LVU in Swedish. And with us today you have me, Johan Linnavar, who works as I'm a lawyer here at Lewis Langley and Partners law firm, and I'm specialized within compulsory care of young person cases, which is also in Swedish called LVU. And then I'm also specialized within criminal cases, migration law, and labor law. And on my right side, I have my colleague.
Yes, Anousheh Abu-Hamzeh, and I'm a lawyer working at Lewis Langley and Partners together with Johan. I also have my specialty within LVU care and also criminal cases and family law.
Thank you.
And so what we will be talking about today is the different questions regarding LVU. And at the start, we'll have some starting points about the children's right to protection. Then we will go over to the requirements for a decision in accordance with LVU. And there we have two different types of decision. One is based on the home environment, one on the child's own behavior. Then we will go over to the legal process and we will finish with questions. So if you have questions, please write them during the lecture and then we can take those questions that we find suitable and which we have time for in the end of the meeting. And to start, we have some starting points. And they are rights and legal principles who are important when you are assessing the law in case of LVU. First of all, and most important is that the child's best interest is the primary consideration in all cases regarding children, especially in cases in accordance with LVU. And of course, the child has a right to express themselves and their opinion in the case, and that is undepending on the age of the child, because a child always has this right. Then, of course, it's easier if you are a bit older than if you are a young child. Of course, you have a right to life and personal development, which has to be considered. There is a prohibition of torture, and you need to be protected from violence, and all state actors have a responsibility to protect children from violence, even if the violence comes from within the family. There is also a right to respect for private and family life, which is of course relevant in cases of LVU, because in these cases, a child can be removed from their family, which affects the right to a family life. The child also has a right to privacy. And then also important is that the parents have the primarily responsibility for the child. So it is firsthand the parents who has to make sure that the child gets all the need and all their needs taken care of.
And we will further now talk a bit about the requirements for a decision in accordance with LVU. In Sweden, when we look at the legal side of things, we have the Swedish Care of Young Persons Act called LVU, which in Swedish is Lagen om vård av unga. And this is, just as Johan was mentioning, a protective legislation for children and a coercive legislation for the families that are affected by this. We are also going to talk a bit about the Social Services Act, which is Socialtjänstlagen. And that is a law that is based on voluntary measures. In cases where the social services, for example, have questions regarding that a child might be placed within LVU, they can, we will talk about this further now, but they can, through the Social Services Act, based on voluntary measures from the parents, for example, or from the child, make sure that it is not an LVU. And the grounds for these coercive measures are basically two grounds that the law looks upon. The first one is the child's home environment, and that is basically what happens within the home that makes it possible for the state to say that they have to take care of the child. And the other one is the child's own behavior, which also commerces with when voluntary measures are not enough. We will get into this very shortly.
Yeah. And to start with the paragraph 2 of the LVU law, we have the child's home environment. In Swedish, we call it hemmiljön. So basically, the law is that if it's due to either physical abuse, psychological abuse, exploitation, neglect, or any other condition in the home, it's a clear risk that the young person or the child health or development will be harmed, then LVU can come into effect and it can be relevant to remove the child from the home environment. And I'm going to further develop a bit on what these different terms means when it comes to this law, because what you think is physical abuse or psychological abuse might not be the same thing as the law thinks is that. First of all, when it comes to physical abuse, even a low degree of abuse can pose a sufficient risk to the young person's health or development, meaning that it does not need to be serious abuse that will leave a bruising or that will in a way harm the child's general health. It can also be enough that the child has been subjected to violence of a lower level. And abuse basically includes all action from someone that cause physical injury, illness, pain, or render the child powerless. That's also important to understand, that it is also to render the child powerless. This can be things as pinching the ear or pulling the hair. So it does not need to be serious violence, but all this is considered because that is things that can cause pain or cause the child to be hurt. When it comes to psychological abuse, that is something that can occur when the child witnesses violence in the home, even if the violence is directed towards another family member, because in accordance with the LVU law, to witness violence is also to be submitted to abuse, but in a psychological matter. But psychological abuse is also things like systematic humiliation, belittlement, or the use of words that negatively impact the child's self-image. And here I have a note down below, which I think is important to think about if you would be in this situation yourself. And that is that the burden of proof, or the level of proof that needs to be addressed in a court, is lower than in criminal cases, which can mean that if someone is suspected of hitting the child or abusing their child, they can be cleared of the criminal accusation, but it can still be enough to go further with a compulsory care decision in accordance with LVU. And this is something that you need to know about, because in the LVU process, it is about the child's best interests and the child's experience of abuse. So even if a criminal case is thrown out, the child can still have the experience of being abused, and that is something the child has to deal with, and the child needs to get help with this. So that's why the burden of proof is different in LVU cases. Then we have the other grounds for a decision in accordance with the second paragraph, which is exploitation, neglect, or any other condition in the home environment. When we talk about inappropriate exploitation, it is primarily referring to someone that someone in the home is being sexually exploited. This is a rare situation in LVU cases, but also something that is very serious and often lead to compulsory care. Then we have neglect, and that encompasses situations where a child does not receive the proper care in the home. It can be inadequate hygiene, it can be lack of emotional closeness to the parents, it can be absence from school to a certain degree, or when the responsibility for the child is placed from the parents on other people who cannot manage that responsibility. For example, if a parent would be to put a lot of responsibility on an older sibling to a younger sibling, then that can be something that constitutes neglect, because you cannot give too much responsibility to a child for another child's life. Other situations includes a wide range of circumstances where the child is at risk due to the parents' actions or behavior. It can be many things, and it's hard to cover everything, but it could be serious conflicts in the home environment. It can be lack of attachment to the families. It can be insufficient understanding of the child's need for support and care. For example, if the child needs medical care and the parents don't agree with that, that can be something that constitutes an other situation. And these types of risks can often be mitigated by receiving support from the social services, because as Anusha mentioned before, there is a possibility to get measures and get help from the social services on a voluntary basis. So often you can mitigate these risks by receiving support from the social services. Of course, you need to show that you have consent to the measurements and that this will have effect, but that is something that is good to know about.
Yes, and then we come to the third paragraph in LVU, which is the child's own behavior. And this is usually something that we, unfortunately, I must say, Johan, we see this more and more due to how today's society look. And when it comes to the child's own behavior, it's about when young people, because usually here it's not super young children anymore, but young children, adolescents, like from the age of 10, 11, and so forth, when they expose their health and development to a clear risk of harm, then this paragraph is the paragraph used by the state and by the courts when they have the need to take a child due to their own behavior. And what type of harm is it that the law is talking about? It's three types. It's either substance abuse, criminal activity, or other socially destructive behavior. I'll see if I can change the picture. When it comes to substance abuse, the law states that it's about alcohol, narcotics, or similar technical preparations. So here, when they talk about substance abuse, even a brief period of substance abuse can constitute a danger to the child. So it might be, for example, that we have a young person who has had problems with substance abuse in the past or in the close past, but still the social services think that this substance abuse is a risk of harm for the child's well-being. And it's also very important that these children, that they get provided with the right care, such as support from outpatient substance abuse services, which in Swedish is called öppenvården, when you have problems with substance abuse, or in serious cases, for example, placement in rehabilitation facilities where they can be for a longer time. And when it comes to criminal activity, this is, just as I spoke about a minute ago, unfortunately something that we lawyers who work with LVU a lot see much more of in our society today. Many times also due to the gang violence, for example, that we have right now in our country. What is important to think about here is that it does not include minor offenses or isolated crimes that are not serious. This is about when a child is having a criminal activity over time. So, however, there might be, if there are isolated serious offenses, such as violent crimes or weapon offenses, it might be sufficient. So it is from case to case, but usually this is maybe not such a sufficient example. Johan, you have to tell me if you have another opinion, but if somebody steals a candy bar from ICA, that is not sufficient to be placed in LVU. So you kind of have the measure.
As long as you don't steal this candy bar on a regular basis as an activity, kind of a criminal activity to maybe gain some value out of it.
Exactly. And as we have said here also, a conviction is not required in these cases, but caution is advised in the absence of a conviction. So when the social services see that a young person is moving into a criminal, context or environment, they usually bring up LVU as a possibility. And also when it comes to the third paragraph, it's also usually overlapping boundaries with other socially destructive behaviors that they see in this young person. And when it comes to other socially destructive behavior, what is that? That we have written here encompasses a wide range of situations where the young person deviates from society's fundamental norms. And for example, it can be crimes that are not considered criminal activity, interaction in criminal or substance abuse environments. And that is something that we unfortunately see more of. Young children, because they are still children, that maybe are not doing anything criminal themselves, but they are moving into environments with criminal people, criminal activities. That is a warning sign. And also use of doping substances. So that is basically what the third paragraph is about.
Yeah. And then we also have a requirement that voluntary measures under the Social Service Act that Anusha mentioned in the beginning of this lecture is not sufficient. So that means that a compulsory care in accordance with LVU can become relevant if voluntary measures are refused, either by the parent, and if the child is over 15, then also by the child, because then you will give more, it's more important what the child says after the age of 15. Then the child also have to comply and say that I am accepting these voluntary measures. Before 15, it's more viewed together with the parents. I think someone needs to mute their, yeah, thank you. And then, of course, when it comes to decisions based on the child's own behavior, those decisions can actually be made after the child turns 18. At that point, it is no longer a child, rather a young person. And then it is only the young persons accepting the measures that are relevant, because then the parents are no longer part of the case. It can also become relevant with compulsory care if the consent provided does not cover the care that the social services finds necessary. Because in LVU cases, you will get a list from the social services where they say what is needed, what kind of care is needed, and that it is that care that they are suggesting that you should consent to. If you are consenting to other kind of care, then you are not actually consenting to the care that is seem to be necessary. Which also brings me to the next point here, which is that the consent is limited. If the consent is limited in time or other conditions, for example, I can say that my child can go to this home, this other home for a while, but he cannot go to the home that the social services want, yet then your consent is limited. And in that case, compulsory care may become relevant. Also, if the consent is not considered reliable, because there will be an assessment and a judgment based on, is this consent reliable? Something that can be negative in that would be if you would have previously had voluntary measures which have been terminated prematurely, so that you have ended them before the care was done. That is something that can mean that your consent will not be considered reliable, but it is also something that you need to look at in case to case. Important when it comes to voluntary measures is that you need, as a parent or as a child, to have a good communication with the social services at all times, even if you don't agree with them, even if you think that this is a hurtful process. It is still very important to be kind, to be open, to listen, and to have a good communication. Of course, you can provide your view on things and provide what you think is the best thing, but remember to always be respectful, because you want to be viewed as someone who is open. I think, thank you. Now, sometimes we get distracted because we have a lot of noise from different participants. So please mute yourself during this lecture.
And now we will get you through how the legal process in LVU, what it looks like. And we can have the pyramid here, as you can see, to show you the administrative levels of how this works. So basically, in the bottom of this pyramid, you see the social services, socialtjänsten. The social services, they handle investigations. So basically, an LVU process always starts with the social services who start an investigation. So they are the support system and also the ones that have these, in Swedish you call it utredning. Now I just lost the investigation. Exactly. They handle the investigation, which then goes further to the court. And the first court that the LVU process goes to is the administrative court, also called Förvaltningsdomstolen or Förvaltningsrätten. We have one of those here in Stockholm. If you are in other parts of the country, there are several Förvaltningsrätten in the area which you live. So the administrative court handles the applications for LVU, which they get from socialtjänsten, and they also handle the appeals regarding termination of care. So that's the instance that works with those questions. Then in the next part, we have the Administrative Court of Appeal, which is Kammarrätten. So we also have Kammarrätten in Stockholm and in several other cities as well. And they, as well as Supreme Administrative Court, which is Högsta Förvaltningsdomstolen, are the courts that work with the appeals in the cases of LVU. When, for example, Förvaltningsrätten has said that there should be an LVU and you as a parent do not agree with this at all, then you go further through your lawyer, of course, to Kammarrätten. And if the appeal in Kammarrätten does not go the way you wish, there is a possibility to appeal further to Högsta Förvaltningsdomstolen. So that's kind of the pyramid, how it looks like. And to further explain how this works, the process very shortly, it starts with, as I mentioned, the social services. They are notified of concerns regarding a child. And this can be concerns coming from the school, it can be from the police, it can be from an individual who calls in. So it's not always that the social services themselves are the ones who start the investigation. The worry can come from another person as well. And what they do in these cases usually is that they make a decision regarding immediate care outside of the family home, which in Swedish is called omedelbart omhändertagande enligt LVU. And that means in the cases that there is very, what do you say, serious concern regarding the child, they make an immediate care decision and take away the child to a family home. And in those cases, you as a parent, if it's the parents that are we're talking about now, you get a counsel. We will talk about this in a couple of minutes. And then the social services start their investigation for this report. And they have to determine within 4 weeks if there is any risk to the child. And this immediate decision is possible to appeal. That is something that we recommend that you speak to with your lawyer if you are ever in this type of cases. But the social services have 4 weeks to make a risk assessment to determine if there is any risk to the child. And the voluntary measurements that Johan was speaking about now is also something. If the social services during this time can see that there are voluntary measurements that could come in instead, that you grant that there is samtycke, I have to speak Swedish now, there might not go further with the LVU. So in these 4 weeks, that's kind of what happens. So if there's a risk, if suitable, it can be voluntary measures that come in instead. But if the social services say that in their risk assessment, it is compulsory care that is necessary, the social services will make a decision on this. And they will make an application within 4 weeks to the administrative court, which is förvaltningsrätten. And then the case is tried in the administrative court. So that is basically the first step. And in these court cases, Johan will speak about it in a couple of minutes, but you have the right to a lawyer. The child has a right to their own lawyer, and the social services also have their own lawyer. So that's how it goes. And after the court trial, there is a decision made by the förvaltningsrätten, the administrative court. And if you are not happy with this decision, it is possible to appeal further. And you can appeal this until the Högsta förvaltningsdomstolen, the Supreme Administrative Court, and after that, the decision gains legal force here in Sweden.
And then we have the investigation itself from the social services. And I have to say that this is the main part of an LVU case, because what will be tried in the court that Anusha described is the investigation from the social services, and also, of course, if you add some evidence on your own, but the basis of the assessment of the case is the investigation, which means that what happens during the investigation, the information that is provided in the investigation is the most important in the whole process. And during the investigation, the social service will assess the child's situation, and that is to determine if there is any risk to the child's health or development, and if there is any suitable voluntary measures to be taken. Or, of course, if not, then compulsory care might be needed due to these risks. During the investigation, the social services, in some cases, they will speak to the child, they will speak to the parents, and they may also do other things during the investigation. For example, they might speak with other family members. It is not, it is common that there is maybe 2 or 3 children in the family, and they have investigations on their own at different levels or at different time periods. So that there are ongoing investigations on many sides, I would say. And of course, they might consult with school staff. That is something that they most likely will do, speak with the staff in the school about the child's life and how the child has been acting. They might exchange information with other authorities. For example, if it is a case about criminal activity, then they will consult with the police authorities to see if they have information regarding the child. And they might also contact other people with knowledge about this child's situation. Let's say that it is a case about how the situation in the home environment is, they might contact the landlord to see if there is any problems on that side. They might contact other people around the family. They might also speak to family members or relatives outside of the core family. And while this investigation for the child and for the parents may feel both intimidating and unfair, it is conducted with the child's best interest in mind. It is always important to remember that the social services' main goal with an investigation is to make sure that the individual child has the best possible situation for their development and health. They don't want to take a child from the family. That's not the goal of the investigation, even if it might feel like that when you are part of this process, because this process is, for anyone who is in it, really hard emotionally and on different levels. Therefore, cooperation and understanding of the social services role is important during the process. You need to understand, you need to cooperate to make the investigation as good as possible and to not paint yourself in a way that is negative for you and that might affect the view on you later on in the process. We then have the trial process. And once the social services decides to apply for compulsory care under LVU, these are the following steps that will occur during the legal process in the court system. First of all, there will be an application that is submitted. And now we are talking about applications for LVU. We will talk a bit more about termination of LVU because that's a different question. We will come back to that. But the social services will apply to the administrative court initiating the trial process. Then there will be a written exchange in the trial where the social services will send their investigation to the court. The court will, of course, read it. As a parent or as the child or young person that is subjected to this, you can write a response with your comments and your additional evidence if you want the court to know something before you go to the court hearing. Of course, at this point, you will have a lawyer, and it is always advised and recommended to speak with your lawyer before providing any information to the court, just to make sure that this is something you want to do and that is good for you. Then you have the court hearing. And the court hearing is when you physically go to court together with your lawyer. In the court, you will have the social services, you will have the young person, you will have the parents. Everybody will get the chance to present their orally present their case and to add maybe more evidence. Any witness that you want to be heard will be heard at this time. They will be heard in court. Either they will be physically in court or they will be heard by phone or video link from another court. After this hearing, the court will take a couple of weeks to make a judgment. And then you will receive this judgment and you can go over it together with your lawyer. If the decision is that the care will not be, there will not be any care under LVU, then of course you don't have to appeal if you didn't want it. But if the decision goes against your will, you have the possibility to appeal, as Anusha told you before. The social services can, of course, also appeal to the Administrative Court of Appeal, also called Kammarrätten. And the appeal process is pretty much the same. When you appeal to the Administrative Court of Appeal, there will be a court hearing. You will have a possibility of written exchange before that. You will also be assisted by your public lawyer at this point as well. But since all the information have already been provided in the first court, since you have already heard your witnesses and you have already sent your evidence, it will be a much more streamlined process. It will be shorter, it will be more into the certain facts in the case. And then you will also get a decision after that from the Administrative Court of Appeals. This decision can be appealed once more to the Supreme Administrative Court. But what you should know is that this is the last court you can appeal to, and the process here is different. It is only in writing, and it will also be needed that they give you a trial permit in order to even consider your case. And that is something that is really hard to get. And of course, this is the end of. And once the Supreme Administrative Court makes a decision, that is the final decision in the case, you can no longer appeal it. And in legal terms, we call this that the decision goes into legal force. The decision is now final, and you will have to comply with it.
Yes, and after a final decision, just as Johan was talking about, care under LVU will either cease or it will continue. And if the care continues for the child, it must be re-evaluated within specific time limits. And if you as a parent or the young person believe that the circumstances have changed significantly and permanently, you can request to the court once again for a termination of care. And this is known as a request for return or hemtagningsbegäran in Swedish. This request is actually done from you to the social services, basically, because the social services must then assess whether care is still necessary or if it should be terminated. So when a person or a parent does a hemtagningsbegäran, you have to tell the social services that we wish to make an hemtagningsbegäran, and they will have approximately 3 months to make this investigation and come with their investigation and make a decision based on this evaluation. And if their decision regarding hemtagning to bring the child home is not in your favor, then you can appeal this, and that will initiate a new court process regarding the termination of care. So even if this is within LVU, it is still its own process when it comes to bringing the child home, hemtagning. And just as Johan was talking about previously, of course, everyone understands that these processes are very hard, especially for a parent who, of course, wants to bring their child home. But while the care is ongoing, it is very important to, in any way you can, maintain a good communication with the social services to show them that you are making positive changes. Because basically, in the cases of hemtagningsbegäran, it is when they see positive and permanent changes that they will tell the court that, okay, we see it fit now for the child to come home. And finally, we have also been talking about the right to a public counsel. So anyone who is a party in an LVU case, whether it's the child or the parents, often has the right to a public counsel. And that also means that the state pays for the public counsel when it comes to LVU, so you don't pay for it yourselves. And this right is always present in the case that involves an application for care under LVU, which Johan was talking about, or a request to terminate care under LVU. So either if it's an LVU-begäran or hemtagningsbegäran, you have the right to have a public counsel. And if you know what in forehand what person you would like to have, then you tell the social services that and you tell the social services which lawyer you wish to have. So it's your right if you know what lawyer you wish to have in this process. And the important thing to know is that the role of public counsel is to safeguard your rights. A public counsel is not the state. When we work for our clients, we only work for our clients throughout the process. So unlike the court, the public counsel is biased in your favor, always. And just as I mentioned, I already mentioned this, but you always have the right. In Sweden, we have the free choice of choosing your own lawyer. So you always have the right to request a specific public counsel to represent you by informing the social services the name of the person that you wish for. And even if these processes can be challenging and lengthy, it is advisable to make this request as early as possible, because once you get appointed a public counsel, it can sometimes be hard to change that person. That was about it, I think.
And I think that our hostess for today, Nana, is outside, so I will go let her in.
Okay.
And then we will take some questions before we have to finish. So we have Nana with us in the room now.
Welcome. Sit here.
And it will be time for questions, I think.
Yes.
You can control the questions, right?
I think if you can do it from your phone.
Okay, I went off this. You just.
We have someone who is reaching the hand up.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much, Yuan and Anusha.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we are taking the question session. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand and we will answer the question accordingly. We have, can Simon help me? Secretary, please help me with the names.
Yes, thank you. James McKeon's hand is up.
Okay, James McKeon, from all the way from Finland, please go ahead. That's my beloved son.
And now I will stop sharing my screen for now so you can see us.
Okay. All right, James, please go ahead. We are not hearing anything.
Makion, we can't hear you if you are talking.
Can-
We are not able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Everybody.
Now we hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
please. Yes.
All right. As I was saying, thank you very much for this interaction. It's been very, very educative. I live in Finland, but I'm sure many of the things you are talking about are similar to the situations in Finland, and that's why I need to get some clarifications here. You mentioned that if the social services establish that the child is at risk at his or her original home, and the case goes to the administrative court, the child also has a right to a lawyer. If I'm clear, in that case, who
Yes.
decides the lawyer for the child, or who recommends the lawyer to the child? I want to know whether the parent has a role in deciding, or the social services decide the sort of lawyer.
I can, yes, in Sweden, because it can be different, it can be different
Yeah.
within the Nordic countries. I am not
Okay.
100% sure about Finland, but in Sweden, when it is the court actually that it is the state, the court that makes sure that both parents and child has a lawyer, and the appointing of the lawyers is based on experience, and all of the lawyers working with LVU in Stockholm, for example, just as an example, all of us are on the list for the administrative court in Stockholm. So when the cases of LVU come in, then the court goes, one by one through the list and appoints a lawyer.
Okay.
Except when a person, and young children often, they don't wish for their own lawyers, of course. So it's usually when we have parents who want a specific lawyer, then the court calls us and says, for example, you have a client who wishes, can you take this case? But when it comes to the children, or mostly when it comes to these cases, it is the court that appoints a lawyer, and it's based on the people on the list. And here in Stockholm, we are a couple of thousand lawyers, I think, who are specialized within LVU. So it depends on who's next on the list, basically.
Okay.
And,
I have.
of
Okay.
course, yeah, I'm just going to add that, of course, even a child has the right to request a certain lawyer as a parent do, and then they have to tell the social services or the court about their wish in that case.
Okay, I have very two quick, if I'm allowed, very two quick questions also. My other question is, when a child is taken away from the parent's home because the social services has established that the child is at risk or the home is not safe for the child, the second home or the sort of foster home where the child is taken to. In the case of Sweden, do you have certain strict criteria for selecting who qualifies to be the foster child, or where the second home the child will be? I'm asking this because I've heard, in the case of Finland, I've heard stories where the social services says that the home is not safe for the child, but sometimes where the child is taken to is even worse.
Yeah.
And so I want to know. So that's one. My second issue is that
We can start with the first one. I think it's easier if we take one at a time.
At a time.
And yes, so before appointing someone to be a family home, the social services need to evaluate if that home meets the requirement of being a family home. So they have to make an investigation. They have to look into where they are going to place the child. And of course, if something would not be good, something will be bad for the child, they can make a new investigation and place the child in another home. Then, of course, in practice, it is hard to find places and families who wants to take a child in, and that is one of the difficulties with LVU, that you don't have enough people open to receive a child in their home, which of course means that it can be hard to find a suitable place.
Okay, my final question probably is, in determining whether the home is safe or for the child, what do you have certain strict criteria that the social services have to follow, or it is just based on the discretion of the social worker? Such that if you have certain boxes to tick, and that certain boxes must be ticked for the conclusion to be reached, that indeed the home is not safe for the child, or it is just based on the discretion, the discretion or just mere observation, and maybe the investigations of the social services.
Yeah, of course, there are requirements, but I don't have them in front of me right now, so I don't want to say exactly which requirements it is and which evaluation they have to do, because I don't have it in front of me, but they have methods how they assess which home is good for a child.
To add to that, normally one has to apply to be foster home, and it goes through a whole lot of procedures. The social services and everything that's needed, they come and inspect the home for some time. It takes actually a long time for them to observe how it is in the home and how safe environment it is to be able to receive another child to take care of the person in the home. So it's a whole lot of process before finally the person is accepted to be a caretaker, if I should say so.
Yes, do we have
We
another
have
question?
another question, yes.
Yes, we have some from XMAI. You have the floor.
It's actually written here. My question is, the way we raise our children in our homeland is different from here, and we see so many children have been taken away from the family. And after that, the children turns worse than when they are with you. Why the government helps to, okay, the person can unmute, you can unmute yourself. It's a Huawei P30 Pro, and ask your question. I think basically the person is trying to say that we have different ways how we raise Africans, how we raise our children at home. But normally the children are taken from us, and you realize that when the children return home, they are worse than how they were before they were taken. So what is the government doing to help, or why does the government take away from parents' home? Something like that. But if I explain it better, we can answer. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's me. It's the same. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, sorry that maybe you didn't get it clear. I think what you explaining is like that. And the point is that why is it government cannot support so that the children can be raised together with the social in the house? Because most of the children, when they take them out from their family, and later on, they are more than worse. So sometimes they become criminal, and you find out the children is not the way they support you want them to, for them to, like the way you want to raise them. And now, and after the government, later on, they find it difficult because you can see that most of the children have been drinkers and be like criminals, instead of them, for you guys to leave them with the parents. This is my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. We understand it is actually a very complex situation because, of course, we have different, cultures, all of us, and in Sweden, there are some criterias that just as we talked about in the beginning today, like when they feel there is a concern that goes within the Swedish law of the social services, a concern regarding the child, they take these measurements. And of course, it is many times, it is very complex, I would say. And many times it is also very sad to hear the cases where the parents actually feel neglected and feel that the child being taken into social services care develops something that is even worse when they come home. But it is actually a very complex question that I don't think we have a straight answer to.
So basically, why they take a child away from the family, that's what we have been talking about today. Those are the requirements, and of course, it is not enough that you just have a different parental style than maybe what's mainstream in Sweden or what's the norm in Sweden. But if your parental style is something that meets the requirement for compulsory care, for example, you have a different view on what constitutes violence. Because in Sweden, I would say that the level of violence accepted against children the bar is low. It is not too much things you can do. Then, of course, there will be a concern and there will be an investigation in accordance with the compulsory care. Or if your view on how you speak to your child and if you can yell at the child or maybe say negative terms is different, then that can be something that makes it a case of compulsory care. But just having a different parental style is not enough to take the children away from the family. Then, of course, as Anusha said, and which I think relates to the first question, is that the level and how would I phrase this? So the care, the actual care when the child is away from the family is important. And in some cases, it is not good. It is not enough. And you need to see how can we do this better as a society. Now that is outside of the law, maybe a more political question. So we will leave that for now.
Yes. Please, are you okay with the answer?
Yeah, we take it the way the answer, because there is a lot of things that I think the government doesn't support. Most of the time, they don't support the parents. They only see what the social have tell them. Maybe it's not the right way. It's not the right way, but the social has said, take the from the children and the parents. They will never hear from you. Like they don't want to hear what you are saying.
Yeah, and that's important. That's why it's important that you have a lawyer to help you in the process. I think also one more thing to mention in regards to culture is that when placing a child outside of the family, the social services should consider placing the child in an environment where the child can keep their cultural connections and their language and identity, to not take that away. That is something that social services need to do. Then, of course, it's not always possible or suitable to do so, but they should consider it. I think we have some other questions. And
yes.
But sorry, 1 minute. If I can, we can get like a number of the lawyers, in case so many people, we don't have the numbers of the lawyers, that in case if something like this happen, we can contact. Thank you. That's the end.
End of the presentation. The numbers will be there.
Yeah,
Yes,
our
the
numbers-
number-
we had the
numbers will be
picture
there.
before, and I think you will save this recording so you can go back in the
Yes,
recording.
exactly. And you
but
can
from-
always contact Ghana National Council
Yeah.
of Sweden also.
I think we had some more questions. We
Yes.
can maybe take
We-
2 or 3 questions before we have to finish up today.
We should take all the questions. We have can a parent take legal action against the social services for failure to provide the parent with all the necessary requirements, including legal counsel, even long after a child has been taken away from the parent's home?
I need to read this question. Can a parent take
Yeah.
legal action against the social service for failure to provide a parent with all the necessary requirements, including legal counsel, even long after a child has been taken away?
I don't know if we understand fully, but.
I think this is if there is a way to go further, if,
I
no,
have
sorry.
a question. Is it possible to seek, is it possible to seek a redress, for example, if a parent feels left out in the process after a child has been taken away from home? And
It is always possible to make a complaint to some of the state authorities boards like Justitieombudsmannen to say that my rights have not been treated the right way.
But what I would recommend in those cases is always actually speak to a lawyer,
Yeah.
because we have had cases where parents, for example, do that on their own, and once you have done such a complaint, it is hard to make another complaint. So it is very good before you do a complaint like that to seek a lawyer who could help you with the phrases that you use. But you can absolutely complain to the state in Sweden. That's
Okay.
possible.
So the possibility exists. Thank you.
Yes, if social services do things wrong, you can complain to other authorities that have the inspection over the
Yeah.
social services. So absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so another question is, what can be done when a child's behavior is antisocial activities? Should the parent report to social, and what will social do?
That's a very general question, of course, and every situation is different. But when you have a child that is behaving in a way that's out of control, it's hard to manage as a parent. Of course, you can ask the social services for help, because asking the social services for help and receiving help is not enough to take the child away. Sometimes people are afraid to ask for help because they think that the social services want to take the child away from the family, but they should provide you with measures that can help you. Of course, sometimes the measure might be to place the child outside of the family, not maybe because of the parents themselves, but about the environment in the neighborhood.
Exactly, the third paragraph that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And then you can try those voluntary measures, but of course, in that situation, it is also important to see how the child will cooperate, because you who are parents know that not all childs listen in all cases.
Yes. Then another question about the school environment.
Okay.
Is there a provision for this in LVU? During the presentation you mentioned, it's quite fast.
Yeah, we have the questions far away, and that's because we want you to
yeah.
see us, but we can do like this, and you will only see me and Anusha maybe.
Yeah, that's okay.
Which one is it? Not
Is this
provision.
one? I want to ask a question about the school environment. Is there a provision for this in LVU? During the presentation, you mentioned the child's home environment, but in the school, there can be physical or psychological abuse as well. What can be done in such a situation?
Should I answer? We understand. I think I understand what you mean. The thing is, LVU, it is a law that looks upon what type of criteria is, how do I say this in a easy way? No, but the criteria when a child is seeing some kind of harm within the home environment or by its own, now I just lose all the English.
Their own behavior.
Their own behavior. When it comes to school, of course, when it comes to school, that is not something that is within LVU. But if a child is, you know, going through physical or psychological abuse in the school, it is very important to first and foremost talk with the school, talk to the principal, and if you need to, also bring in the social services. But a child being abused in school is not a criteria for LVU, because it has to do with child's own behavior, or if we as parents in any way mistreat our child, which makes LVU being accurate. I hope you understand my
And of
explanation.
course, to be maltreated or abused in school is also something that can be a crime, and then you always have the possibility to report it as a crime
Exactly.
to the police. And in that case, also consult with a lawyer or request a lawyer. But as Anusha said, LVU is about when the state has to go into the life of the child and maybe remove the child from his situation. In school, that is something outside of LVU, even if how the child acts in school might be something considered, but not how the school acts towards the child. I think we have some raised hands in the audience.
And we have other questions as well.
Okay. One more here.
Samsung, SM, you have the floor. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay.
Samsung SM, the person with Samsung SM.
Waiting, we can take your question here.
All right, let's go. Okay.
Is it lawful to move a child born as a Swedish to the parents' homeland to live there for some time or years? And in general, of course, the parents can decide where to move with their children, as long as it is not harming the children. And since this summer, we have a new law, which is almost like the requirements is almost the same as the one we explained earlier about LVU, but in some cases, the state can prevent a parent to take their child outside of Sweden if that would pose a risk to the health and development of the child. Now, we will not have time to go over those new rules, but there are rules as to when you can stop a child from going outside of Sweden with their parents. But of course, parents are the one who are the caretakers of the child, and in general, they have the right to move together with the child. And of course, the parents has to agree on where they should move. So you cannot take the child without the other parents' consent, etc. But in general, yes, it is lawful, but in certain circumstances, it might not be lawful.
All right, thank you. Inokosu, unmute yourself, you have the floor now and ask your question.
After that,
Okay.
we have Makian.
Please, Nana, can I ask a question? Or,
Yes,
you know,
please go ahead.
yeah, my name is Nanaya. Quite recently, I think last week or last 2 weeks, on the news, I heard that where the children are taken to be taken care of, the place is used as a training place for criminal crimes, to train them to be criminals. And because of that, they are closing some of these places. So it gave me some feeling like, if it's like that, if truly it's like that, then I think it's very dangerous. Look at the social, taking a child or children like 2 years, 4 years, 6 years to somewhere from their parents, and then train them somewhere, put them somewhere. They lack their religion. They lack their training, their language, everything. And then they grow up and then they get to these places and then they become criminals. Instead of, I think, Johan, you work close to the social. Please, when you meet, try to discuss with them that they can give the training at home to the parents, like one brother said, they can give the training at home to the parents so that the parents can train their own children. I think it doesn't help so much. It's just so pathetic. I don't know words to use. That please, I know you can. You people, you have influence. You can do it. So I'm telling the plaintiff. It was on the television, TV4. I heard the news on TV1. SBT 1 and 2. It was a big discussion, and they said they were going to even close some of these places. So if this is what is going on, then I think it's very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Something has to be done now to help the society, to help the police, to reduce their work for them. Otherwise, the work will be too much for them in the future. Thank you.
We understand your concern. I think if I start, Joanna, you can join in. What you are talking about now, I think, is something that this society has to work on, but it's HVB-hem and SIS-hem. I will not go into this very thoroughly because it's very much, you know, a lot of legal aspects. But when a child is over 14 years old in Sweden, and when they, due to their own behavior, as we spoke about in the third paragraph, I mean, these cases when the social services are afraid that the children are harming themselves by being within criminal activity or so forth, they place them usually not in jourhem or foster homes like young children under the age of 14, but they place them in these homes called HVB-hem. And I understand your concern because this has been something that the Swedish society really has to work with, because with the enormous increase of gang violence in Sweden the last couple of years, we have a situation when we have a lot of young children, usually boys, who due to these the third paragraph, that they are harming themselves by being in these criminal environments, are taking to HVB-hem. And just not to make this either more complex, but sometimes within LVU, we also have children, and usually I'm making a generalization, but usually it's boys who sometimes are actually, we don't know if they have committed crimes, but they are suspects of very serious crimes, and they are usually put in these HVB-hem to have, what do you say, Johan? To have a further control over them. But as you are saying yourself, we have seen that the control within these HVB homes are not always that good, because the society has not been able, because there are so many children within these homes right now. And we also have another aspect: when you are a young person under the age of 18 who commit a very serious crime, you go to something called SIS-hem. So we have a problem with SIS-hem and HVB-hem in Sweden, but it's important to know that this is usually when it comes to the child's own behavior, and when it has to do with usually suspicion of criminal cases. And the child, usually boys, but there are also girls, of course, are over 14 to be placed in these homes. I don't know if this, if you want to.
No, but I think it's a good, you're raising an important question, and it's a complex question where maybe we as lawyers don't always have the answers. And of course, as a lawyer, we represent our clients, and we want, if they are placed in care, we want the care to be as good as possible, either if we represent the parents or if we represent the child itself. But this is a question about how good are the care, where are we placing the children? And of course, we can raise our voices because we see it in our line of work. But in the end, it is, as we said before, someone was touching on this before, this is a political question about where we put the society's resources, how we view this, and if we think it's important enough, which you as citizens of Sweden, living in Sweden, needs to be part of to raise your voice about. Because this is something that has to change on a societal level, that we as lawyers, we can speak about it, but we cannot change the political environment. I think we have two more hands reached here, and I would say if James wants to speak, now.
Okay.
Oh, you spoke before. Is it okay if we take someone else?
Yeah, if there's nobody, then I'll come. Yeah.
Someone named Enoch who have raised the hand for quite some time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation, and this is very helpful. I have two concerns. In this presentation, I don't see a line. What is your definition of discipline in this context? Because I see almost all the points that were raised. I want to know from you, what is your definition of discipline? You cannot hear me?
We hear you, but you said, what is the definition of
discipline?
Discipline in this context, because I see all the points that were made are just heading towards leaving the child to go anywhere he wants to go. I don't see any exception, or because talking about taking away the power of the child, and we know children sometimes want to even go and do something silly, and so if all these things are considered as taking away the power from the child, I saw a statement like that, taking away the power of the child. What is that implying? And my second point, or second question, I think somebody also mentioned that you don't deal with things that happen at the school, but then the school can report to the social. And I have an interesting point.
But I just want to make sure that we understand your question. What is the question? Could you phrase the question another way, so maybe we should be able to answer it?
Yeah, so my first question was in dealing with law, what is your definition of discipline in the context of dealing with the children? Because that is very difficult to define.
With that one.
Okay.
Discipline is not a term used in LVU cases. Therefore, we have.
Yeah, I saw that from your presentation that it has eliminated it completely.
Okay. And your second question, what was that?
Yeah, the second question is, yeah, I understand that you don't deal with things that happen or the welfare of the child at the schools, but then the school reports to the social, and then it comes, it follows the process. And I see there's a gap there. One of the experiences I've had is where I see the teachers ask the children silly questions. Some of those questions don't make sense at all, because if you ask a child about things which they don't even understand, definitely they're going to give you answers which makes them to report to the social. And once they report, some way, somehow, it becomes an issue for investigation. And then I've also realized children that are reaching the point of understanding, once the social, the school puts that in their mind, then they also tend to misbehave. So I'm just thinking that we need to take a look at the link from your point of not caring about what happened at the school, but the school can report to the social, and it gets into the system. So
to clarify a bit, I think you got somewhere wrong. Yes, the school can report to the social services. And again, yes, the parent also have the right to report the school to the social services if there is a reason for it. So it's not like it's only the school that can report a child, but the parent can also do that if there is a reason for it. I think
Mm.
that's why you got it wrong.
So the parent,
Yeah.
I think Anusha explained this a bit more previously. Of course, they can report to school and animal treatment in school, but not in the LVU process. More, you have boards who are supervising the school system, and you can report to those kind of administrative levels.
And also if there is a crime in school, I mean, if a child, for example, is badly mistreated or hit by another child, if they are older children, I'm not speaking when they are like 5 or 6 maybe, but then it can be criminal cases. You make a police report and so forth, but just as Johan is saying, it's not within LVU that the school has a role in the law, so to say.
We have one hand and one more question, and those are the last two we will be able to answer today. We can start with this question that is written down here, and I can read it. We have it far away from us, but if there is a case opened on violence against a child, which the police closed as it was found not to be true, and the parents agreed to take counseling support from the socials, but eventually couldn't take due to time constraint, and the case was closed by the socials months later, could there be any issue in future as a result of the counseling not taken? So first of all, this is a very specific question, and I will not answer it in these specific circumstances, but you can say in general, if a case is closed by the police, it does not mean that the case will be closed by the social services, because as we mentioned during the lecture, the proof level for a criminal case is much higher than an LVU case. And this is because a criminal case is in the end punishing someone, but a LVU case is about protecting the child. The LVU case is about the child's need to not experience violence, but also to talk about and be treated for their experience of violence. And then even if it's not found to have happened in the criminal case, it can still be something they need to be treated for in the LVU case. Then taking support and counseling support is, of course, a good way to show the social services that you are taking this voluntary effort, you understand the child, and you want to help the child in this situation. Now, to not go through with such support because of time constraint is, of course, something that can be considered in the future. For example, if there will be an LVU case opened later on the same grounds that we think the child has been beaten or in any way experienced abuse, physically or psychological, and there will be a question about, but okay, we will make voluntary efforts, we will participate in everything, then you not participating before is, of course, something that will be considered when they assess if your consent is reliable. So I think I will stay there because otherwise it will be too specific, and you need to remember that all cases are different. Everybody have different histories. And if you would be to get in this situation, always consult with your lawyer before you make an action. We have one hand up from Nifemi. Do you want to?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for the presentation so far. I just want to ask a question. I think it's previously asked, but I want to ask it in a different way. I think the last speaker mentioned about the definition for discipline in Sweden, but if I get correctly, you said the word discipline is not used, right? And I want to ask, as believe the parents are the first guardians for the child, and if the parents are the guardians, in a way, how or what is the definition of guiding the child aright in Sweden, or how it seems to be applicable in this case? how can a parent guide their children aright when it seems the children are misbehaving or putting up acts that shouldn't be? And also in the case of the school, I think recently there was a case we had, I'm not sure how true it is, about a girl that was bullied to death even by her classmates. So if things like this happens, how do parents are expected to take, control of this? Okay.
Yeah, and I think that is a really good question that is outside of our expertise, because now you are going into how a parent should act to be raising their child, which is not something we as lawyers are experts on. We can tell you what happens if you go over what the law says is reasonable and what you are able to do, but these questions are more for maybe other expertise than the law expertise.
Basically, in Swedish law, just you have to correct me, Johan, if you think I'm wrong, but there is no measurement, or not measurement, but det finns inget utrymme för fysisk disciplin. That's what I want to.
Yeah, so basically, within the Swedish law,
There's no discipline.
No. There is room for discipline, but if the discipline of the child is that you use physical force, then the room for that is very limited.
Exactly.
Because you are always gonna be borderline abuse if you use physical force towards a child, and that's a very thin line that maybe you don't want to walk.
Yes, we will take Makion now. Please go over to your question. You had one
Okay,
question.
please. Just very, very, very.
We don't hear you.
We are not hearing you.
I'm sorry. I think it's clear now. Yeah, I want to see how Johan can and my beautiful lady could encourage parents who have issues in court. I don't know, but it could be the same in Sweden, that many parents, when they have issues with the social services and the issue goes to the administrative court, many of them are not interested in pursuing the case to the Administrative Court of Appeal, because some of them do not have trust that they will receive justice in the Court of Appeal. Some people are of the opinion that the court is in cahoots with the social services, such that any sort of negative decision against the social services could sort of ridicule the social service or undermine the integrity of the social services. And therefore, people feel that even if they go to the appeals court, they're not going to get any positive results. So they leave it there. Even if they have a very good case to appeal, they do not appeal. And the case it ends there. From your experience as lawyers, what are the chances, or from what you know? I mean, how often do parents win cases against the social services in the Court of Appeal? And also, with the Supreme Court also, do we really have cases where a case travels to the Supreme Court and the parents wins? And from 1 to 100, how often does it happen?
I cannot give you a number, because the risk is that I will say the wrong number. Of course, we have case law where the Supreme Court, that was my last lecture there. The Supreme Administrative Court have decided in favor of the parents or of the child. So it can happen. But now what you need to know is that the Supreme Administrative Court is a court more for guiding in other courts than to decide on all cases. So it has happened, but of course it's rare. When it comes to appealing the decision from the administrative court, one thing that's important to think about, first of all all the courts in Sweden are independent from the social services. And I want to be clear with that. They are not part of the social services. They are independent, but they base their judgment on the social services report, the investigation. And that is how it is in LVU cases, because that's the main information in the case. So that's what they have. So if you don't provide other evidence, or if you don't provide witnesses or your evidence, then they only have the social services information, and that's what they're going to decide on. I think one objective is also, it's important to think about when you appeal from the administrative court to the administrative court of appeals, is what is a win? Okay, to get the children back today, is that a win? Yeah, it can be. But can it also be good for you to make the judgment so that the court acknowledge some of your improvements? Maybe you go to the administrative court of appeals and they say that, yes, now you have changed yourself. Now you are open to taking voluntary measures, which you were not before, but now we can see this. That is, for me, in some ways also a win, because in these cases, you have to think in the long run, what can help me and my child in the long run? Because at some point, the social service will re-evaluate the care. You might also have the possibility to request to get the children home, if you can show that the situation have changed over time. And if you have a court decision saying, yeah, you have changed, not enough, but you still have changed, that is something good for you. Or one more example, I will let Anusha finish the question, but for example, maybe you have both home environment and the child's own behavior. Maybe you appeal to the court, you get the own behavior away, you only have home environment, or vice versa. That can also be important. So we have to say, what is a win? Because in the end, this is about the best of families and the best of children. So it's not like maybe kind of a civil dispute. This is something else.
No, I just wanted to fill in. You already said that, Johan, but we see positive cases. We see cases where there is a change when you appeal. But just as you were saying, what they look at is, have you been making changes, for example? That is one of the most important things. And even if we really understand that these cases are very, very hard, but I think both of us want to emphasize that if you in any way or matter come to such a situation, try to, in the sense that you can, cooperate with the social services, and also use, your legal services from your lawyer appointed by the state. Let the lawyer help you to, if you have, as you were saying, witnesses, what can you bring forward and so on. But my experience is that in the cases where the parents actually, no matter how hard it is, show the social services that we want to cooperate. We might not agree with your decision, but we are cooperating for our child or the children's sake. In those cases, it is usually an easier way to come to getting the children back, I would say.
Yeah, and of course, just to finish this answer, it is easy for us to say how you should act in this way, because of course you can never know how it feels to be there before you are in that situation. So saying cooperate with the social services, it's easy for us to say. We understand that can be very hard for someone, especially when the children have been taken away from them, but it is still important. And you have your lawyer, your public lawyer, as someone outside of this, giving the legal expertise, but also 100% standing on your side. So that's important, to use the lawyer to talk about your thoughts, to talk about how you can act, and listen to what they say, because they are not part of the family, but they are still on your side. And we as lawyers have the legal expertise, and we see these cases all the time, so we know what is important in the case. Then, of course, between cases, you will be on your own with the social services. And that's why I'm always emphasizing, even if you feel hurt, even if you are sad and you feel betrayed by the social services. They want the best for your child. You might not agree on that, as Anusha said, but try to be respectful, try to listen, and try to cooperate, because that is the best in the long run. I hope we were able to answer your question a bit.
We have a Gifty's hand up. Gifty,
And-
please.
Yeah, now this Gifty, that will be the last question we will be able to answer. Then we have to finish for today because unfortunately we are running out of time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and thank you for the presentation. Mine is not a question, it's actually about preventive measures. The best will be that we don't even get to that point where we will need lawyers and we will need to, understand the LVU and things. I'm calling from Norway and we have issues with the ban of Tjenesten here. So my little advice to my fellow friends, Ghanaians, Africans, is that we should learn new ways of parenting and childcare. We cannot be in a different country and assume that the way we were brought up, the way we do our things with our kids are the best ways of doing them. We have our good culture from our home countries, and we have the Norwegian or the Swedish or the Nordic way of doing things, and in fact, the laws. So let's try and unlearn the bad habits and learn the new habits of parenting. Most of us adults have gone through things that we thought they were disciplinary measures of keeping children, but which actually are affecting our adult lives and relationships. And these are the things that we say discipline. I heard a brother of mine say, and there was the missing element of discipline. There are ways that we can discipline our children without pulling their ears, shouting at them, knocking them back and forth. I didn't know all this before I became a parent. Nobody told me this is how it's going to be. I didn't even know I was going to be a parent in a Nordic country and face these laws. But I want to encourage all of us. It is possible to unlearn old bad habits and relearn new parenting skills, which will prevent us from even getting in touch with all these agencies and all this mess. Because trust me, if you're first with them, it's not fun. It's not fun. So please, with all respect, with all dignity, let us try, find out how you can live with your children, how you can discipline them in a nice way, how you can talk to them, dialogue with the kids, how you can show more love and affection. And by so doing, communication is a key factor. Communication with authorities is a key factor. You don't have to get into these troubles before you start seeking help. Let us go the other way, preventive measures. Thank you so much for this session.
Thank you, Gifty. And I think it's important, of course, that if you can stop it from becoming a case of compulsory care before it happens, that will always be the best. I think I will leave the room to Josephine Nana to finish up this meeting for today.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope everybody has learned a lot from here. If I will still give opportunity to take one question. If anybody has a question that needs to be taken, we can do that so that nobody feels left out. So if anybody has a question that needs to be dealt with generally, please go ahead and we will do that before we close. And I see Dami Lola Johnson, please, a quick one. The time is fast spent and the lawyers need to go over to other activities.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. I actually dropped my question on the chat room, but it looks like the chats are not being read anymore. I've dropped it a while ago. So the question is about having contact with social service. So let's say you have a situation where the school probably reported that, oh, the kids were saying things and it looks like, okay, these parents are being disciplined or they are being beaten, and stuff like that. And then it's actually got to the police, but however, the police closed the case because they found out that, okay, this thing is not true. The kids got there and the kids were like, okay. Hello?
So I think I have read your question in the comment section and we answered it before.
You have gotten an answer. It's kind of a direct and a private question. So it can't be dealt with here since we are dealing with general questions regarding LVU. So I think you've already received an answer from Yuan, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
answered that before.
You can always contact us
Yes.
with direct questions.
Yeah. Is that
in
okay?
another-
That's fine, although I can't see an answer, but maybe after the meeting, I don't know.
After the meeting, you will not see it because then we will close it. But I can read it to you if you open it. I just can read it to her.
No, what do you mean?
Naima, I think,
No,
I mean,
we
it has
gave the
been answered.
question, we answered it generally before. We read the question loud and then answered it before. So it's
Can
not.
refer to the video recording and then seek for the answer. I think so.
Thank you.
It has been answered.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay, so was that a new one? Or something?
Yeah, but unfortunately, we are running out of time.
Because
Some of
we
you
need
have
37
got your questions answered before. If you have any other questions, in the lecture, which will be published, I think on YouTube or
We will circulate it in the
Okay.
same channels that it will be
you-
on Facebook and YouTube and all the.
you will
Our-
find our contact information. You can also contact the Ghana National Council to ask for it, and then you can
I
ask
think
us your questions in private.
we can even, if you have the slide where you have your contact numbers, it can just be on whilst I speak
I
to,
will try
whilst I speak
to.
to them, yeah. People might want to write it directly.
I can share from here. You can.
You can share, okay, please do.
Do you see it now?
Where is it?
Here on the
Oh.
screen.
Okay. Please, you see the contact details of our dear lawyers.
Yes, we do.
You see the emails as well. on
The
right
emails
side.
as well on the right side, and then you have, and they have WhatsApp as well. They are on TikTok, Instagram, and I mean, you find them everywhere. Thank you so much for joining, and the biggest thanks go to my two adorable lawyers for your selfless service and always being there whenever you're called upon. We are grateful. On behalf of Ghana National Council of Sweden, I say a big thank you for the collaboration so far. We look forward for more collaborations and more education to our community. And to all of us, I say thank you so much for joining us today. The recorded version will be shared across. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions, and feel free to contact the lawyers if you need any clarification or you have individual cases. They will be more than happy to receive you and to deal with your cases accordingly. And I also want to emphasize on that. Sometimes we have this illusion that when the state gives us lawyers, they play against us because they have to be loyal to the state. That is not the case, as we've all heard it today. So we should always feel free and deal with them accordingly. And I thank my sister Gifty from Norway so much for the advice given. It is always good to deal with preventive measures before you get to a situation whereby you need to seek for logical help. So let's try as much as possible. We are in a foreign land. It is not easy, but we should try to deal with the laws of the land. If you have any problem, please don't hesitate to call on your fellow sister or brother who might know more about parenting and young children, children's upkeep in Sweden or any other European country to seek for help, seek for guidance, seek for advice. And together, we will live here peacefully, happily with our families and with our dear children. Thank you so much for joining us today. See you another time with another topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.